Investigating God. Last week we looked at what Christians believe about God, and we explored words like 1. Creator, Jesus, Trinity, Father, Holy Spirit, and love. Today we're going to ask the question, what do Muslims believe about God? Have a little think and pause the video. The word for God in Islam. Did you know that names have meanings? My name is Sophie, which means wisdom. My best friend is called Abdul. His name means clever. Can you ask your family what your name means? Hi, remember me? My name, Imran, means prosperity or host. Some names are different in different languages. Bethan is the Welsh version of Elizabeth, and Pedro is the Spanish version of Peter. Here are the names of Noah, Elijah, and Mary, all from the Bible. These are their names written in English, Arabic, French, Hebrew, and Romanian. Spend some time and look at their similarities and differences. Have you heard of other names for God? Maybe you have heard of Lord, or Father, or Almighty, or Alpha and Omega. Have you heard of the name Allah? Just like the different versions of the names of Noah, Elijah, and Mary, God is an English word. Most Muslims use the word Allah for God, as this word was used where the Prophet Muhammad lived and is from Arabic, the language that the Quran is written in. God and Allah mean the same thing. We're going to hear a story. The Prophet Ibrahim finds out more about God. But first, think about the wind. Can you see the wind? How do you know the wind is there? Muslim people believe that there is only one God. For lots of people who believe in God, it can be hard to think about God when, like the wind, God cannot be seen. The Prophet Ibrahim finds out more about God. The Prophet Ibrahim was a thinker. He thought long and hard about the world around him and also about God. He thought lots when he was old, and he thought hard when he was a young boy too. He had lots of big and difficult questions that he wanted to know the answer to. One of the questions that the Prophet Ibrahim wanted to know the answer to was about where the world around him came from. The Prophet Ibrahim loved Allah. He knew that Allah was his best friend, and so he knew that Allah would be able to answer his big and difficult questions. Allah helped him to understand. There is a story about Allah and the Prophet Ibrahim in the Quran, and it goes a bit like this. One night it was dark, really dark. In the time of the Prophet Ibrahim, there were no streetlights to light up the sky. Allah showed the Prophet Ibrahim a star in the sky. The star was bright, beautiful, and the light from the star was clear for all to see. As the Prophet Ibrahim gazed up at the star, he was amazed about how bright and beautiful it was. He thought to himself, This is so beautiful that it must be God. Sadly, after a little while, the star could no longer be seen. The prophet Ibrahim said, "Well, this cannot be my God, because my Lord would never go away." Next, the prophet Ibrahim could see the moon high up in the night sky. He shouted out loud, "The moon is so beautiful. This is clearly God." After a time, the night ended, the morning light came, and the moon could no longer be seen. Feeling sad, he sat down and said, "Well, this cannot be my God, because my Lord would never go away." As the prophet Ibrahim sat on the ground, he began to feel warmer and warmer. He looked up into the morning sky, and there was the sun shining brightly. Again he shouted out loud and jumped to his feet. "What a beautiful warm light from the sun! It is so big and gives light and warmth. Surely this is my God." Later that day it became the evening time, and the sun no longer gave warmth and could no longer be seen. The prophet Ibrahim sighed and said, "Well, this cannot be my God. My Lord would never go away." At this moment he stopped looking up and started looking around. He saw the amazing tall trees that had given him shade through the day. He saw the beautiful flowers and smelt their amazing smell. As he looked up into the evening sky, he saw the clouds, and then he realized, "My God is the Lord of everything. He never leaves us alone. He made all of these things, the stars, the moon, the sun, the trees, the flowers, and the clouds. He is Lord of everything. And God is my Lord too." What has the prophet Ibrahim shown he believes about God? Is this what Muslims believe about God? The story was based on Surah Al-An'am 6:74-80. I think that it shows there is only one God, that God cannot be seen, and that God is the creator of the world. Use this template to create a mobile that has 4 cutouts hanging from it. Write and draw pictures on the cutout shapes and respond to this sentence starter. Muslims believe God. You could say Muslims believe God takes care of all people, or Muslims believe God never goes away, or even Muslims believe God is in charge of everything. How do Muslims know what God is like? Take a look at these pictures. Although Islam does not allow pictures of God, there are lots of ways that Muslims can find out about God. One way is through stories from the Quran, another through the 99 names of Allah. Here are some examples of the 99 names of Allah shown in calligraphy by artists. Reading, reflecting on and learning about these names helps Muslims to learn about God. Here are 6 of those 99 names. Al-Jafar, the all-forgiving. Many Muslims say this means one who forgives everyone. The Prophet Muhammad was asked, "What would happen if I do something wrong?" And the answer was given, "Allah forgives." But what if I continue to do things wrong? Allah will keep forgiving. Al-Hadi, the guide. Many Muslims say this means that Allah will always give guidance and will help people with signs so they know what to do. Muslims use the guidance in the Quran to help them to know how to live. Al-Wadud, the loving. Many Muslims believe this means that Allah loves people and wants them to be close to Him, and know they always have the love of God around them. Muslims try to show love to their friends, family, and those around them. Al-Hakim, the wise. For many Muslim people, this shows Allah has wisdom in all actions and the things asked of followers. Muslims try to be wise by thinking about what the right thing is to do and then doing it. Al-Karim, the generous. For many Muslim people, this name shows that Allah always gives them amazing things from the world around them to see, eat, hear, and live in. It encourages Muslims to be generous, sharing money, food, and their kindness with others. Al-Mani, the preventer of harm. Many Muslims say this means Allah will protect them from dangers. For Muslims, this is Allah acting like a parent, seeing the dangers we don't see and helping us away from them. Have a go at carefully copying a piece of calligraphy which shows a name of Allah. Complete these sentences. This name might teach Muslims. This name might encourage Muslims too. Here is another story, the Prophet and the ants and the crying camel.
Welcome to Religions of the World. Islam, the religion of Muslims. Islam is the second biggest religion in the world. It began almost 1,500 years ago. The Arabic word for God is Allah, and this is what many Muslims call God. This is Amina. She is 11 years old. She lives in Glasgow with her parents and her younger brother Rahib. Amina and her family are Muslims, which means they follow the religion of Islam. Amina's family keep a copy of the Quran, the Muslim holy book, at home, and Amina loves to sit down and read it. Her dad explained that it was the word of Allah that was spoken to the Prophet Muhammad by an angel. These words were written down later by the Prophet's friends. As well as the stories and scriptures in the Quran, there are also other stories in Islam about the Prophet. Amina loves telling stories about the Prophet to her brother Rahib. One of her favourites is the Islamic story of the Prophet and the ants. One day, as the sun went down, all of the ants were returning home after a very busy day collecting food for their nest. They were looking forward to a good night's rest. Suddenly, they saw big clouds of smoke drifting closer and closer to their nest, and the air was getting hotter and hotter. There was a fire! All the ants began to run as fast as their little legs could carry them, so they could get out of the way of the fire and smoke. They heard a voice from above saying, "Look what you have done! You've built your fire too close to the ants' nest. The poor little creatures will get burnt." It was the voice of the Prophet. He was camping near to the ants' nest with some of his followers who had lit the fire. As soon as the Prophet had spoken, the fire was put out. The ants were saved. The Prophet said to his followers, "No matter how small or large the animals are, they are all important to God. Everyone should take care of them." The ants all hurried back to the nest and went to bed. They felt safe because they knew that the Prophet was looking out for them. And that is the story of the Prophet and the ants, said Amina. Rahib giggled and said, "Can you tell me another one, please?" Amina smiled and started to tell another story. The Islamic story of the crying camel. It was a really hot day, so hot that everyone in the town was sheltering in the shade. The Prophet was walking through a garden when it sounded like someone was crying. There was a poor, overworked camel tied up to a tree with no shade. The hot sun was beating down on the camel and he had nothing to drink. The camel's owner was resting nearby in the shade. The prophet walked over and said to him, "Your camel is just as much a part of God's world as you or I. It is our duty to treat the camel well, to feed it, and to make sure that it has enough to drink." The owner looked very ashamed and promised to take care of the camel properly from now on. Amina smiled at Rahib and said, "It's really important we care for all of Allah's creatures equally." Rahib nodded and asked, "Can you tell me another story?" "Not tonight," said Amina. "It's time for bed." Rahib hurried to bed, excited to hear what stories Amina would tell him tomorrow.
The Prophet Muhammad, the Hungry Man, and the Kind Stranger. Once there was a poor man who was really, really hungry. His tummy grumbled and rumbled because he was so hungry. "I know," he thought to himself, "I will go to the mosque, where people are praying to God. Someone there will give me something to eat." So he set off. The mosque was a large, beautiful building with a high tower. Many people were praying. The hungry man went in and looked around. "That man looks kind. He will surely help me," thought the hungry man. He had chosen a very significant person. His name was Muhammad. Many people in the area believed he was a prophet, a messenger from God. The Prophet Muhammad wanted to help, so he asked someone who lived near the mosque to find some food and provide a bed for the hungry man. "I'm sorry, I don't have any food, or a spare room," said the man Muhammad asked. "He can't stay with me." The Prophet turned to another man, but again the same answer came back. The hungry man looked very sad, and his tummy grumbled and rumbled with hunger. Finally, the Prophet Muhammad turned to a third person. This time the answer came back, "Yes, I think I can help. My wife and I have some food and a room where this man can sleep." The kind stranger took the poor hungry man home with him. He whispered to his wife what had happened at the mosque. "But what can we do?" asked the wife. "We have hardly enough food to feed our children and ourselves, never mind this poor man. How can we possibly take him into our house?" "Prophet Muhammad asked me to help this poor man," said the kind stranger, "so we shall. But he must not think that we haven't got enough food to share, or he will feel guilty and not accept it." For a while the man and his wife wondered what they were going to do. "I know," said the kind stranger. "When the children have eaten and gone to bed, we will turn the lights out and serve the food in the dark. We will tell him that we keep the lights off so as not to wake the children. We can pretend we are eating, but really we will give all our food to the hungry man." So that is exactly what they did. They sat down in the darkness, and while the hungry man ate, the husband and wife pretended to eat too. The hungry man's tummy stopped rumbling and grumbling, and he went to bed happy and full. After a good night's sleep, he thanked the kind stranger and his wife and left the house. When the Prophet Muhammad saw the kind stranger later in the day, he said thank you and told him that Allah was pleased with him for being so kind. This is a traditional Muslim story. As the Quran says, "The righteous are those who feed the poor, the orphan and the captive for the love of God, saying, 'We feed you for the sake of God alone. We seek from you neither reward nor thanks.'" The Holy Quran 76:8. So we have heard several stories, including the Prophet and the ants and the crying camel, the Prophet Muhammad, the hungry man, and the kind stranger. Have a little think. What do these stories teach Muslims about what is important to God? Today we have been investigating God and answering the question, what do Muslims believe about God? We have learned that Allah is the Arabic word for God. We have learned that many Muslims believe that God is one. We have learnt that most Muslims believe God created the world and his influence can be seen in it. We have learnt that many Muslims believe that God cannot be seen, but they have 99 different names that describe what God is like. Well done for investigating God.